I sleep with my boss every night. That is a very big secret. My name is Emma. I am 25 years old. I work in a big office in the city. My boss is named Mr. Bennett. He is the owner of the company. Everyone at work is afraid of him. He is a serious man. He wears expensive suits. He speaks with a loud voice. When he walks into the room, everyone stops talking. They look down at their computers. They work very hard. They do not want to make a mistake. But I know a different Mr. Bennett. Every evening at 5 o'clock, the workday ends. My coworkers pack their bags.
Every night, the same black car stops outside my office. I get inside. Nobody sees me leave. And every night, I go to sleep in a house that is not mine. My name is Emma. I am 26 years old. I work at a marketing company in a big city. My boss owns this company. His name is Mr. Bennett. At the office, everyone is a little afraid of him. He wears dark suits. His voice is sharp. When he walks past a desk, people sit up straighter. Nobody wants his attention, but there is something none of my coworkers know. Something I have never told a single person at that office. Every evening at 5 o'clock, when everyone else goes home to their own lives, I wait quietly in the lobby. I check my phone. I watch the door. And then his car arrives. I get inside. He looks at me, and for a moment, he does not look like the man from the office at all. "Good evening, Emma," he says. His voice is different now. Softer. We drive together, away from the noise of the city, to a large quiet house on the edge of town. We go inside. We eat dinner at the same table. And later that night, I sleep upstairs, under his roof. I know exactly what you are thinking right now. And I am not going to tell you if you are right or wrong. Not yet, because the truth is more complicated than it looks. And if I explain it too quickly, you will miss the most important part. What I can tell you is this. 2 years ago, I was not living in a beautiful house. 2 years ago, I was not even living in an apartment. 2 years ago, I was sleeping somewhere you would never expect. To understand how a frightened, poor young woman ended up living inside her own boss's house, you need to go back to the very beginning. Back to a small village, a single bag, and a dream that almost destroyed me before it saved me. This story does not start with Mr. Bennett. It starts with me, alone, arriving in this city with nothing. 2 years ago, I lived far from any city, in a small farming village where nothing ever seemed to change. My father grew rice in the fields behind our house. My mother managed our small home. We were not rich, but we had enough, and we had each other. Still, I wanted something more. I had a dream of working in a real office, wearing proper clothes, becoming someone who could send money home and change my family's life. I remember standing in our kitchen and telling my mother, I am going to the city. I will find work there, She held my hands and looked at me for a long moment. "The city does not care about you the way we do," she said quietly. "Please be careful, Emma." I promised her I would be fine. Then I packed one small bag and left everything I knew behind. The city felt enormous. Loud. Cold, in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. After many days of searching, I finally found work as an office assistant at Mr. Bennett's company. It was not an exciting job, and the pay was small. But I had a desk. I had a purpose. I told myself that was enough for now. I rented a tiny room above a noodle shop. The walls were thin enough to hear my neighbors breathing. But it was mine, and every month, after paying rent and buying food, I sent whatever remained back to my parents. At the office, Mr. Bennett barely noticed me. He handed me files. He gave sharp instructions. He never once used my name. To him, I was simply the assistant, but I noticed something strange about him, something small that I never mentioned to anyone. One evening, working late, I saw him standing quietly near the security desk, speaking with an older janitor named Mr. Hahn. I could not hear the words, but I saw Mr. Bennett hand him a folded envelope, then walk away quickly, almost as if he did not want to be seen doing it. A few days later, I overheard Mr. Hahn telling another worker that his medicine bills had been paid, mysteriously, by someone at the company who never gave a name. I did not think much of it at the time. It was just a strange, small moment. I filed it away in my memory and continued with my quiet, tiring routine. I had no idea that months later, I would remember that envelope and finally understand exactly what kind of man my boss truly was, but that was still far in the future. Right now, my life felt manageable. Difficult, lonely, but manageable. Then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was my younger sister. And the moment I heard her voice, I knew something was terribly wrong. "Emma," my sister said, her voice trembling. "It's Dad." My chest went tight. "What happened?" I asked. "His heart," she said. "The doctors say he needs surgery immediately, or he might not survive. It is very expensive. We do not have the money." For a moment, I could not think at all. My father, the strongest person I had ever known, was suddenly in danger, and I was hundreds of miles away. "How much do you need?" I asked. She told me the number. It was more money than I had ever held in my life, more than I had ever saved. I checked my bank account that night. It was almost empty, just enough for next month's rent and a little food. "I will find a way," I told her. "I promise you." The next morning, I went to a bank and asked for an emergency loan. They said no. I was too young. My salary was too small. Nobody would take the risk on me. That night, I sat alone on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall for a long time. There was only one real choice in front of me. Keep the money for my rent, or save my father's life. It was not a difficult decision. It was simply a painful one. I transferred every single dollar I had to my sister that night. Use this, I told her. Save him. Days later, my father survived the surgery. My family called me, crying with relief. You saved him, Emma, they said. You are our angel, I smiled through the phone call. The moment it ended, I sat on my floor and cried until I had no tears left. I had $0 remaining. Not one. 1 week later, there was a sharp knock at my door. It was my landlord, his arms crossed. Where is this month's rent? He asked. I do not have it yet, I admitted. Could I pay you next month, once I am paid again? He shook his head firmly. No money, no room, he said. You need to be gone by tonight. I begged him. Please, I have steady work. I will pay you as soon as I can. He was not interested in my promises. Rules are rules, he said, and shut the door in my face. That night, I packed the same small bag I had once carried into this city, except now, I had absolutely nowhere to go. I sat in my car outside my old apartment building, gripping the steering wheel, and made a decision I told no one about, not my parents, not a single coworker. A decision that would define the next 2 months of my life in ways I never expected. That first night, I parked my car on a quiet residential street a few blocks from the office. I told myself it would only be temporary, just until I saved enough for a new place. I curled up in the back seat, using my jacket as a pillow. Around 2 in the morning, a sharp knock on the window jolted me awake. My heart pounded as a flashlight shone directly into my face. It was a police officer. Everything all right in there? He asked, his tone suspicious. Just resting before an early shift, I said quickly, trying to sound calm. He studied me for a long moment before finally nodding and walking away. I did not sleep again that night. After that, I learned to park somewhere different every few nights. Always somewhere with streetlights, always somewhere that looked ordinary enough not to draw attention. One afternoon, sitting in my car during my lunch break, eating crackers from a nearly empty box, a small girl from a nearby apartment pressed her face against my car window and stared at me with wide, curious eyes. I forced a smile and waved. She ran back inside, and I sat there afterward, feeling completely exposed, wondering how many other people had noticed me without my knowing. Money disappeared faster than I expected. I began counting coins on my dashboard some mornings just to know if I could afford gas that week. I threw away food more than once because I had no way to keep it cold. And it had spoiled sitting in a plastic bag on the floor of my car. The mornings were the hardest part of all. I still had to arrive at the office looking calm, organized, and professional, as though nothing at all was wrong in my life. I woke before sunrise most days and drove to a 24-hour gas station nearby. In the small public restroom, I washed my face with cold water, brushed my teeth, and carefully applied enough makeup to hide how exhausted I truly looked. I changed into office clothes in the back seat, checking carefully that no one from work was anywhere nearby. One morning, my stomach dropped when I noticed a car that looked exactly like Karen's, a coworker from the office, pulling into the same gas station. I ducked low in my seat, my heart racing, until the car finally pulled away. It had not been her. But the fear stayed with me the entire day. I could not let anyone from work discover this. Not because I was ashamed of working hard. I was ashamed of how far I had fallen, and terrified of what people would say if they knew. Each morning, I looked at myself in the gas station mirror and whispered quietly, "Nobody has to know this yet." I had no idea that the secret I was protecting so carefully was about to become impossible to hide, in the most public way I could imagine. This continued for weeks. Then months. Winter arrived, and everything became harder. My car turned into a freezer at night. I had 2 thin blankets, but I still woke shivering every few hours, my breath visible in the cold air inside the car. Some mornings, ice had formed on the inside of the windows. I grew thinner. My office clothes started hanging loosely on my frame. My eyes were constantly red from lack of sleep. I told myself, again and again, that this was temporary. That things would improve soon. At work, I skipped lunch nearly every day. When my coworkers invited me to join them at a nearby restaurant, I always had an excuse ready. "I already ate," I would say, or "I have too much work today." Nobody questioned it. Nobody knew to look closer. One Thursday evening, staying late to finish paperwork, I noticed Mr. Bennett's car still in the parking lot much later than usual. I quickly gathered my things, worried he might see me leaving on foot toward my car, parked 2 streets away, rather than getting picked up by anyone. I nearly ran the last block, my heart pounding, certain someone was going to ask questions I could not answer. Nobody did. But it was becoming exhausting, constantly calculating, constantly hiding, constantly afraid of being seen. Then, on a particularly freezing afternoon, everything caught up with me at once. I had eaten almost nothing in 2 days. I was dizzy from the moment I woke up, but I forced myself through the morning as usual. Around noon, Mr. Bennett asked me to retrieve a file from a high shelf near his office. I stood up too quickly. The room tilted sideways. My legs felt disconnected from my body. The last thing I remember is reaching for the shelf, and then the floor rushing up toward me. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on an unfamiliar leather sofa. The room was quiet, warm, unfamiliar. A glass of water sat on the table beside me. And Mr. Bennett was standing there, watching me with an expression I had never once seen on his face before. It was not annoyance. It was not impatience. It was fear. "Emma," he said, his voice low, "are you able to hear me?" I tried to sit up immediately, my instincts screaming at me to apologize, to get back to work, to hide this moment like I had hidden everything else. But something in his face stopped me. For the first time in 2 months, I did not know how to lie my way out of what was happening. and what came next was a conversation I had been dreading since the very first night I slept in that car. "I am so sorry," I said quickly, struggling to sit upright. "I will get right back to work, Mr. Bennett." "No," he said. His voice was quiet, but firm enough to stop me completely. "You just fainted, Emma. You are staying right there." He sat down slowly in the chair across from me, studying my face carefully in a way that made me want to look away. "When was the last time you ate a real meal?" he asked. I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. I genuinely could not remember. The silence stretched on far longer than either of us seemed comfortable with. "Emma," he said again, more gently this time. "Tell me what is going on." Something inside me finally gave way. I had spent 2 months being strong, being careful, being perfectly professional every single morning no matter what I had endured the night before. I could not hold it together for even one more second. The tears came before I could stop them. "I do not have any money left," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I sent all of it home. My father was sick. He needed surgery." Mr. Bennett did not speak right away. He simply sat there, listening, letting the silence hold space for what I was saying. It was the first time in months that I felt like someone was actually paying attention to me. "Where do you live now?" he finally asked, his voice careful. I stared down at my hands. I could not make myself say it out loud. "Emma," he said, quieter now. "Please tell me." "I live in my car," I whispered. The room went completely silent. I watched his face change slowly, watched something shift behind his eyes. He turned toward the window, where cold rain streaked down the glass, and for a long moment, he said absolutely nothing at all. "You have been sleeping in your car," he finally repeated, almost to himself. "In this weather." "For how long?" "Almost 2 months," I admitted. He stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his hands pressed against the frame, his shoulders tense. I sat frozen on the sofa, certain in that moment that I was about to lose my job entirely. "Please," I said quickly, "do not let me go. I can still work hard. I promise I will do better." He turned around, and for the first time, I saw something close to anger on his face, though I quickly realized it was not directed at me at all. "Fire you?" he asked, almost stunned by the idea. "Emma, I am angry with myself. I see you at that desk every single day. I never once noticed what you were carrying." He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair. "Get your things," he said. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We are going to get your car," he said. "And then, you are coming home with me." I sat completely still, unable to process what I had just heard. My entire situation was about to change in a way I could never have predicted. I shook my head immediately. "No, Mr. Bennett, I cannot do that," I said. "You are my employer. It would not be right now," he said firmly. "I am simply someone who will not allow another person to sleep outside in this weather. You will stay in my guest room until you have saved enough for a proper apartment." This is not a discussion, Emma. That evening, I followed his car through quiet streets until we reached a large house with a wide garden. Inside, it smelled like fresh wood and clean linen, nothing like the cold, damp air I had grown used to. He showed me to a bedroom with a soft bed and tall windows overlooking the garden. "This is your room now," he said, placing a key gently into my hand. I stood frozen in the doorway. An hour earlier, I had been unconscious on his office sofa. Now I stood inside what felt like a completely different world. "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked. His confident expression softened into something quieter, something sadder. "My daughter lives overseas," he said. "We do not speak often. I have always hoped that if she were ever in trouble somewhere, a stranger would choose to help her the same way I am helping you now." Then I remembered the envelope. The janitor. The medicine bills that mysteriously disappeared. I understood, suddenly, that this was not the first time Mr. Bennet had quietly helped someone without expecting anything back. That night, I ate a full, warm dinner across the table from him, and for the first time in over 2 months, I slept through an entire night without waking from the cold. That night was 6 months ago. Since then, my life has quietly changed shape. At the office, everything remains professional. I call him Mr. Bennet. He assigns my work. We never speak of our arrangement there. But in the evenings, we have slowly become something closer to family. He has a golden retriever named Max who follows me everywhere. He leaves business books on my nightstand with small handwritten notes. "Read this, then tell me your thoughts." I studied every night, determined to prove his trust in me had not been misplaced, but I was not the only one noticing changes. One morning, arriving at the office slightly early, I spotted Karen standing near the parking lot entrance, watching Mr. Bennet's car pull away after dropping me off. She did not wave. She did not smile. She simply watched, her expression unreadable, and I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. Whatever peace I had found inside that house, I suddenly understood, was not going to last much longer without consequences at work. Karen had worked at the company for almost 10 years, longer than anyone else on our floor. She had trained new assistants, covered countless extra shifts, and had once been passed over for the project manager position herself, 3 years earlier, in favor of someone with far less experience. I did not know all of this yet. I only knew that Karen watched me with narrowed eyes and rarely spoke to me directly. One afternoon, she finally approached my desk. "I saw you yesterday," she said, crossing her arms. "Getting out of Mr. Bennet's car." "Again, we had a late meeting," I said quickly, my heart racing. "A meeting," she repeated flatly, "at 6 in the evening?" She did not bother hiding her disbelief. "You have been spending an unusual amount of time with him lately, Emma. People are starting to talk. We are simply coworkers," I insisted, my face burning. She studied me for a long moment. "Just be careful," she said. "I have watched people get close to management before. It never ends well for the person with less power in that relationship. There was something almost protective buried underneath her sharp tone, though I did not recognize it at the time. I only felt exposed and afraid. The whispers grew steadily after that. I would walk into the break room, and conversations would stop abruptly. I heard fragments as I passed. That is why she still has her job. She must be his favorite for a reason. One evening, chopping vegetables in Mr. Bennett's kitchen, I finally broke down. He walked in and immediately noticed. "What is really wrong?" he asked, sitting across from me. "The people at work," I admitted. "They think we are together. I have saved enough now for a small apartment. Maybe I should just move out, and the gossip will finally stop." He was quiet for a long moment. "You may leave whenever you are ready," he said, "but do not leave because small-minded people made assumptions. You have done nothing wrong." Around this same time, he handed me something unexpected, a folder outlining a struggling client project that had already failed twice under 2 different managers. "I want you to try leading this one," he said. "Completely on your own." I was terrified. The first 2 weeks were a disaster. I missed a deadline. A client threatened to leave the company entirely. I stayed up most nights convinced I had made a catastrophic mistake, and that Mr. Bennett would regret ever trusting me with anything at all. I nearly asked him to give the project to someone more experienced. Someone like Karen, who clearly knew this company better than I did, but something stopped me from giving up. Perhaps it was remembering exactly how far I had already come, from a freezing car to this desk, this opportunity, this chance to prove I belonged here. I decided to fight for it. What happened over the following month would determine everything. I stopped sleeping properly, though this time it was determination, not desperation, keeping me awake. I called the unhappy client personally and listened, really listened, to every complaint they had. I rebuilt the entire project proposal from scratch, incorporating everything Mr. Bennett had taught me over the past several months about strategy and management. Slowly, painfully, things began to turn around. The client agreed to one final meeting. I prepared for 3 days straight, rehearsing every possible question they might ask. The meeting succeeded. Not perfectly, but genuinely. The client agreed to stay, impressed by the new direction I had proposed. When I told Mr. Bennett, he simply nodded, though I could see something like pride in his expression. "I knew you could do it," he said. "That is exactly why I gave it to you." Word of the successful project spread through the office. For the first time, a few coworkers who had never spoken to me directly stopped by my desk with genuine compliments. Karen said nothing, but I noticed her watching from across the room, her expression harder to read than usual. A few weeks later, the company held a large staff meeting. Mr. Bennett stood at the front of the room. "We are naming a new permanent project manager," he announced, "someone who has already proven herself capable under real pressure." Everyone glanced around, guessing. The new project manager is Emma, he said. The room fell silent for a moment. Then Karen stood up abruptly, her voice sharp. "Is this really fair?" she asked loudly. "We all know exactly why she got this position. Everyone knows she is living in your house." Gasps rippled through the room. Every face turned toward me. The secret I had guarded so carefully for 6 months was suddenly out in the open, in front of the entire company. My face burned with humiliation. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole, but Mr. Bennet did not look angry, or embarrassed, or defensive. He looked directly at Karen, calm and steady, and I realized this was the moment everything would finally be explained. To everyone, all at once, yes, he said simply. Emma has been staying in my guest room. Would you like to know exactly why, Karen? Because I think you, more than anyone here, deserve a proper explanation. Karen's expression flickered, confusion replacing her anger for just a moment. He glanced toward me, silently asking permission to finally tell the whole truth. I took a deep breath and nodded slowly. It was finally time for everyone to know exactly what had happened over these past 6 months, and exactly what kind of person Karen had been arguing with all along. Emma arrived in this city 2 years ago with a single bag and no connections, Mr. Bennet told the room. She has worked here faithfully every day since. When her father became critically ill, she sent every dollar she owned to save his life, even knowing it meant she could no longer pay her own rent. The room grew completely silent. For 2 months afterward, she slept in her car, he continued, and still arrived here every single morning, hungry and exhausted, without ever once complaining. I did not know any of this until the day she collapsed at this office from exhaustion. When I discovered the truth, I offered her a room in my home. Nothing more complicated than that. He turned toward Karen directly. I know you have given this company 10 years of your life, he said, his voice softer now. I know you were passed over for this exact position once before, and I know that was handled badly. That was my mistake, not Emma's. Karen's arms slowly uncrossed. Her sharp expression cracked, replaced by something closer to shock, and then quiet shame. I am sorry, she said, her voice barely audible. I did not know any of that. Mr. Bennet nodded gently. Now you do, he said. Coworkers I had barely spoken to over the past 2 years slowly approached afterward. I had no idea, one whispered, her eyes wet. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, said another, squeezing my hand. Karen approached last, hesitating before speaking. I misjudged you completely, she admitted quietly. I let my own disappointment turn into something unfair toward you. I am truly sorry, Emma. I told her I understood, and I meant it. For the first time, I saw her not as a rival, but as someone who had simply been fighting her own difficult battle for a long time. That weekend, I finally called my parents and told them everything, the eviction, the car, all of it. They were on a plane within days. When they finally met Mr. Bennet in person, My father shook his hand firmly, his eyes glassy with emotion. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter," he said. When I could not, Mr. Bennet simply smiled. "She took care of herself," he said. "I only opened a door. I still live in that house today, though I am now saving toward a place of my own. When that day eventually comes, I know I will miss our quiet dinners, and I will certainly miss Max following me through the garden every morning. But I understand now that this friendship was never going to end at any front door. Looking back, I finally understand something important. The night I thought my life had completely fallen apart, sitting alone in that freezing car, was not the ending of my story. It was only the beginning. If you are struggling with something difficult right now, please remember this. Asking for help is never a weakness. Kindness still exists in this world, often from the people you least expect. And your hardest night may simply be the doorway to your next chapter. Keep going. You are stronger than you think.